Good morning, everybody. This is Lucian Smith here on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Got with us in studio my old friend Joey Fillingane, Senator from District 41. Am I right right there, Senator?
You got it.
There we go. Well, thank you for taking the time to be with us. I know it's a busy time at the legislature.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here, and of course, we miss Paul tremendously.
Amen.
But you're certainly doing a great job filling some mighty big shoes.
Well, you're kind to say that. It's an honor to sit behind the microphone that Paul did. So, well, how was yesterday? It was a killing day. So
yes, it was similar to the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones for those fans out there like myself. You have all these hopes and dreams of your bills, and then you show up at a feast and everything pretty much dies. There's blood on the floor. But, some things did pass. A lot of things didn't. But there's always next session, and there's always code sections out there that could be amended, perhaps. So all is not lost.
So of the legislation that lived yesterday on the Senate side, what are sort of your priorities? What are the ones you're looking at right now as something you hope to see pass?
Sure. Well, thanks for the question. We're working a lot in Judiciary B, which of course I chair in the Senate, and on issues dealing with vagrancy, homelessness, aggressive panhandling, things of that nature. We're getting tons of complaints, especially from mayors, but from constituents as well, all over the state, about the fact that over the years we've really done away with a lot of the penalty side of issues dealing with homelessness, vagrancy, panhandling, and when you approach somebody on the street who's not where they're supposed to be, they're on someone else's property or on public property, or they're aggressively reaching out and touching your vehicle, touching you, trying to get money from you, the law enforcement really has very little that they can hold over the person's head in the way of penalties or fines. It's mainly a, would you mind moving? And if they say, go jump in the lake, the law enforcement
not much they can do.
Pretty much has to leave.
Really?
Yeah. So and that's our fault. That's not law enforcement's fault. We've, over the years, I guess, gotten a little too woke on that topic and have done away with the criminal side of the penalty. So not that we want to be punitive, but certainly we need to give law enforcement the ability to say, now, if you don't move along or don't remove this encampment or don't stop being too aggressive with asking for donations to your cause, which is probably mainly yourself, then
right,
we can do something about it. So that's one of the bills that we're working on the Judiciary B side, among a number of others. There's some bills that the Attorney General's office has promoted dealing with like child grooming and things of that nature, trying to make sure that adults that are over 21 don't send suggestive and repeated messages to children that are 15 or under trying to ask for sex and those types of things.
Is that bill still alive at this point?
Absolutely.
What else? So I'm going to go back to the vagrancy thing, because I heard the debate on the House floor on some legislation.
Sure.
It seemed like I was surprised that it was controversial at least on the House side. I know you weren't involved in that debate, but there seemed to be a lot of pushback from people who were concerned about basically not letting people panhandle in the street and making them be over on the side of the road, which I would have thought was totally non-controversial, but it turned into a bit of a controversial discussion.
I used to serve in the House when I first came to the legislature. It's a great, fun place to be, and things that you think will pass right through don't, and things that seem very controversial, hundreds of pages worth of bills sometimes pass with very few questions. So you never know. But under the Grants Pass decision from the U.S. Supreme Court, this past term, it was sort of a landmark decision that came down on the side of allowing local governments and city governments to say that you do have a public interest, both in public health and safety, in making sure that people that heretofore had argued that they had a constitutional right to sleep in the open air on public property or even someone else's property, they really do not. I mean, there are interests on the public side and the taxpayer side that say, no, there are certain restrictions and rules. You can't just set up an encampment anywhere you want and claim that it's your constitutional right to live there in a tent and have all kind of human waste and needles and all these kinds of things. So the Supreme Court really came down on the side of allowing for restrictions. Now, all the different 50 states are going to come up with various ways of trying to thread that needle and figure out what is permissible and what's not. But I think everyone now has the green light from the U.S. Supreme Court to try to restrict that and rein that in a little bit.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I end up traveling for work a fair amount, and it's interesting going to these more liberal cities where you do have these just massive encampments. I mean, it's like there's a Boy Scout camp out, except it's a bunch of folks who are doing drugs and defecating in the street and whatnot. I mean,
it's so sad. I mean, and it's for those people's best interest as well.
That's such a good point.
It really is, because we had a hearing the first week of session, actually, in the Judiciary B and Municipalities Committee with Chairman McMahon from Tupelo. And it was interesting, the testimony that we heard from, the sheriff of Hinds County and many municipal leaders across the state, that, 85% of people that are quote-unquote homeless either have a substance abuse problem or a mental health issue or a combination thereof. So most people that you find on the side of the street, they need help.
Right.
And they won't always agree that they need help or agree to get the help. But at the same time, the public has an interest in making sure we have clean streets and safe streets, and that people don't, hurt themselves or hurt others.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's a good point that it's not just about the people who want to have a safe community. It is about the individuals themselves who may be suffering from those sorts of mental disorders.
Absolutely. Yep.
What other focuses do you have this legislative session, Senator?
Well, we're going to obviously look at the tax bill. We get a lot of questions back in the district, speaking at different meetings about, the grocery sales tax, the income tax, and these sorts of questions. I think retirement, the PERS system, there were hearings late into the night. Last night I left the Capitol about 7 o'clock, and there were still hearings going on. The Rules Committee was having a hearing on some additional maybe PERS legislation that would create an additional fifth tier for employees that have not yet been hired. So again, no one is talking about messing with anybody that's currently in the system or currently retired and receiving benefits. But you can't be an ostrich.
I'm going to ask you that question explicitly, because I know every single retiree or PERS member is asking that. Is there any possibility that the legislature is going to pass legislation taking away anybody's current PERS benefits?
Absolutely not. I mean, my mom is listening. I'm carrying my 2 kids to school this morning on the radio, and she is a PERS beneficiary. I'm in the PERS system as a member of the legislature. So many people, I think the statistics show that close to maybe 1 in 5 Mississippians either are personally in the PERS system or have a close family member who is a member of the PERS system. So no, nobody in their right mind in the legislature, because, we all want to be able to be reelected, most of us at least anyway. And we all know that if you start messing with benefits that have already been guaranteed and promised and people have paid in and worked for, you're not going to mess with that stuff. But at the same time, in order to protect the system so those same people can continue getting their guaranteed payments, we have to right the ship. We are in the hole. It's not an existential crisis at present, but you don't wait till it becomes an existential crisis to do something about it. And so, kudos to the Lieutenant Governor and to Chairman Sparks and the others who are spearheading the efforts to make sure that in perpetuity the PERS system is healthy, it's well-funded, and I think that probably is going to mean for new employees that have not been hired yet, have not even started yet, that they may not get the same generous benefits that the current employees and current retirees have been, fortunate to have had. But at the same time, it's most important that we make sure that the integrity of the system is maintained.
Right. So that we can honor the promises that have been made to retirees and to near retirees.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about I want us to get to the taxes here in a little bit, but any other big piece of legislation yesterday that you were disappointed to see die on the House or Senate side, or maybe we're happy to see die?
Well, no, not really. I know that there's a judicial redistricting plan that is being bandied about between the 2 chambers. I think there was a House version that passed. The Senate, I believe, is going to be looking aggressively at that plan. It's a good first step and a good start. I spoke with Chairman Owen last night, and there's a lot of negotiating still to be done. There's no way to make everybody happy. Anytime you start carving up either legislative districts or judicial districts, somebody feels, aggrieved, and somebody's going to be ecstatic and others really upset. But, it's our goal to try to make sure that a judge or a set of judges in a particular district have about the same caseload as another judge getting paid the exact same thing in another end of the state. It's not fair to have, judges who are all making exactly the same thing, one having, 3,000 cases and the other only having 500 cases. And so as population shifts around and caseload burdens also have to shift around. So we're going to be looking at that as well. And I think this is the year we have to do that. Otherwise, the issue it gets punted to the state Supreme Court.
So every judicial district is potentially up for change.
Absolutely.
I know there was a lot of discussion about whether Madison County and Rankin County would be separated. Is that on the table?
I don't think that's very likely. No,
Okay.
I think they have been paired together for a long period of time, and I think the lieutenant governor has been very forthright and clear about the fact that he has no intention of messing with that happy union.
Well, there we go. You got time to stick around for another segment?
I'd love to.
Y'all, this is Lucian Smith here on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Stick with us. We'll have more with Senator Joey Fillingane. Thank you for being with us. We've still got with us here in studio Senator Joey Fillingane. Senator, thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having me, Lucian. I enjoy it.
Well, y'all, what time? Y'all going at 9 or 10 this morning?
We're going at 10 this morning. There are meetings starting at 9, however, the Capitol.
Okay. Well, I can tell you're already dressed for Senate business.
I'm yours as long as you need me.
Well, we were talking a little bit about PERS before the break.
Yeah.
Not going to make any changes to current retirees or current active members, but some possibility of maybe a different tier for new employees. That's one of the things being considered.
Absolutely. I think you set that goal out into the future at some point so that it doesn't affect anybody currently either retired or in the current system paying in. But then you say, okay, new employee, if you want to come start working for the state or the county or whoever that's in PERS, just know that beginning now, these are going to be the rules of the road, and we are going to be guaranteed a retirement benefit, but you may not be guaranteed a cost of living adjustment, or as Rich a benefit, it may take 8 years to vest instead of 4 years to vest. I mean, there are those types of changes that can be made and that the actuaries tell us we need to make in order to right the ship as it relates to the PERS fund. And of course, other people talk about things like the way it's in the corpus is invested. I mean, because basically about 85% of the PERS fund is invested in some form of stock. So when the stock market's going gangbusters, you look at the PERS fund, you think, oh, we're doing great.
Right.
You know, we're killing it. And then the opposite is true. When the market takes a significant dip, which it does from time to time, then you think, the sky's falling. There's no money in PERS left or whatever, which neither is true. But those wild variations depending on the stock market can make the picture a little more distorted and less real. So I think anything we can do, both in the way of a new tier and maybe the way that we put some guardrails on the type of investments that the PERS board, invest the monies in, could certainly be a move in the right direction. There's probably going to have to be some additional contributions too, which the legislature has been doing over the past couple of years under the leadership of, Governor Hoseman, the Senate, and of course the House leadership, Speaker White as well. We've been paying off a lot of the state debt. We haven't been putting a lot of money back on the credit card, which is moving us in the right trajectory fiscally. But we need to do the same for the PERS situation as well.
Yeah, well, kudos to the lieutenant governor and to others at the legislature who are willing to have those discussions, because PERS is a tough one politically in the sense that it's always going to get a strong reaction from people.
Oh, yeah.
And the results, no matter if y'all passed a bill today addressing PERS,
right,
the effects of it wouldn't be felt for a decade. So a lot of the people who are currently elected are going to be long gone. But it has to be dealt with now so that when we get there, there's not that problem. So kudos to everybody for looking at it. Curious about, obviously, one of the things that's going to dominate this session, or I think is obvious, it's going to dominate it, is what we're going to do with our tax system.
Sure.
The Senate has been clear that they intend to bring, the lieutenant governor and Chairman Harkins have been clear that they plan to bring a Senate tax proposal. Do you have any insight on what that might look like?
Well, thanks for the question. Certainly, Chairman Harkins has been working feverishly along with the Lieutenant Governor, and they're, I think, going to do a fantastic job in their proposal. I've not seen the final plan because I'm not sure the final plan is actually completed yet, but there have been discussions, intentional small groups meeting, trying to work through what we want the Senate version of the tax bill to look like. And I think what you're going to see, and certainly what I support, I think most of the Senate would support, is a plan that cuts taxes immediately in the overall scheme. So when you're looking at all the adjustments, up and down and all around, the ultimate thing, if we're going to have a tax cut bill, we want it to be an immediate tax cut, not, 10 years from now, we're going to see some overall tax cut benefit. You want something that's more immediate in nature. I think the Lieutenant Governor has been very clear about wanting the grocery taxes to go down.
Right.
I think we all are in agreement, Governor Reeves, Speaker White, and Governor Hosemann, that we ultimately are trying to get to the same place of eliminating the state income taxes. The question is, how do you get there? Do you do it, super aggressively and get rid of it immediately? Do you space it out over a couple of 3-4 years, or do you do something more, gradual, maybe a 10-year phase out? So the good news for conservatives in Mississippi is that we're all singing off the same hymnal.
Right.
It's just a matter of, are we on the second or fourth verse, of the hymn, and how do we get to the same place we all want to get to? So I think we're going to have something that's very measured, that's very intentional, that actually cuts taxes immediately, that doesn't take 5 years to realize an overall tax cut, and I think some of the provisions in the House plan, for instance, like the sales tax, that would apply not to like internet purchases,
right,
but it would apply to the mom and pop stores. I think that's a little unfair and maybe not as well thought through as it probably should have been. If you're going to have a sales tax increase, certainly you don't want to disadvantage the folks here in state who are paying property taxes on a storefront of some sort or a business of some sort, and then you don't put that same tax increase on the Amazon purchases. I mean, that seems inverse and a little wrong from my way of thinking. So if you're going to do something along those lines, it should certainly be fair to the people here at home and not disadvantage Mississippi business owners.
Which I think makes sense. We're early in the session. It's the beginning of February. We've got 2 months or so before the end. Mm-hmm. So I assume what's going to come out from the Senate is not going to be a carbon copy based on what you're saying of the House version. No, we pride ourselves on being independent of the House. Yeah. Do you think it will be possible to come? Sometimes, and you know this as well as anybody. Sometimes you're able to work out a compromise this session. Sometimes you have two proposals that are so far apart that you end up taking another year to work on them and sort of harmonizing something everybody can live with. Sure. Do you have a gut instinct as a long legislative veteran of whether we'll be able to get to some sort of agreement on the two chambers on taxes this year? I'm certainly hopeful that we will. I don't know that the differences are so vast that they can't be, brought together. I feel like it will be interesting to see the House's response to the Senate plan once it is fully formed and rolled out here in the next, I would say, probably week or two. At the latest. So I think there's a lot of room for common ground, and I think we're all trying to get to the same place ultimately. Right. So I feel confident about it. It does feel, the private conversations I've had, there seems like there is a lot more confidence about the ability to come to some sort of agreement this year than there might have been a year ago. Sure. I mean, I think people are working in good faith, and they're smart people on both ends of the hallway, so there's no reason we ought not to be able to come up with an agreement. Yeah. Well, if you've got questions for the senator, hit us up at the C Spire text line at 601-879-4395. Jace on the text line wants to know the status of legalized mobile sports betting. You have any sense of what's going on there? I think that issue got very close last session. I think it's probably as close or even closer this session. So, I mean, I think whether you support it or not, there's already legalized sports betting in Mississippi, as I understand it. It's just that you have to be in the casino to do it. So the question is, are you bringing it out of the casino to where people can use the online versions? And that's interesting that he would raise that. It's a good question because, yesterday one of the bills that we did get out of the JUDB committee is you have a lot of black market gambling, online gambling going on in Mississippi, especially because some of our surrounding states have put stronger laws in place prohibiting it, say in Louisiana and Tennessee, and so people are coming to Mississippi to do their illegal sports betting and that sort of thing. So I think it's incumbent upon us that we get it right. And so the bill that we passed yesterday, the Gaming Commission came and explained it, and the casinos are in favor of this law that would not penalize the player who is doing the illegal betting, because in some instances it's on your app and you don't even know that it's illegal. I mean, it's there and you click on it and you think, well, if I can get to it, it must be legal. And technically, in a lot of instances, it's not. And so you're, unbeknownst to yourself, you're breaking the law by sports betting on one of your apps. So the law goes after
the platform, which in many instances, of course, are overseas, not even in country, but the Gaming Commission has asked for some tools to try to rein that in. So I think it's incumbent upon us that we both, on both ends, that if we're going to do it here in Mississippi, we do it in a way that doesn't hurt the casinos that are here and have invested lots of money, building up their industry here in Mississippi under the guidelines that the legislature laid out for them, and at the same time that we punish those who would break our laws from the platform perspective.
That makes a lot of sense. We're getting a bunch of questions here on the C Spire text line. Paul in Hernando wants to know what chance the ballot initiative has of being restored this year.
Between zeal and nilch, probably.
Okay, so that's my instinct as well.
Yeah, I don't see. It's interesting from the very far conservative corners of the state. Where I kind of live in my political spectrum, you have to ask yourself what issue is out there that a ballot initiative would bring back to life that the conservative legislature is not already taking care of. I mean, do you want to expand Medicaid? Is that what you want to do? Do you want to put abortion back available, on the streets? Do you want to put, all these liberal woke type policies into the state code that we've, banished from the state code? I mean, what is
are you
the disease you're trying to cure here with the ballot initiative?
Can you stick with us for one more segment?
I'd love to.
Y'all stick with us. We'll have more with Joey Fillingane coming up after this. This is Lucian Smith here on the Gallo Radio Show. Good morning, y'all. This is Lucian Smith here on the Gallo Radio Show on SuperTalk Mississippi. Still in with Senator Joey Fillingane. Thank you again, Joey, for taking this much time to be with us. I know it's a busy legislative day.
Well, thanks, Lucian. You've been a good friend for a long time, and I'm always happy to be with you.
I know. It's we were talking about that off the air. When you were a freshman, I think I was fresh out of college working for Governor Barber, and it's been a minute or two.
It's been, but you still look great. I don't know what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
You look,
thank you.
Young as you ever have.
It's that's when you get fat and old looking early, you can continue to look the same for a long time.
Penalty flag, no.
So there was, I think this is Judd A, not Judd B, but there's been a sort of divorce bill that I know has been kicked around for a while, having to do with different grounds.
There is, and credit to Chairman Wiggins, who's a good friend of mine, who is trying to make it to where, especially women, but I mean it can affect men too, that are in abusive relationships, but yet they don't have the requisite evidence always. I mean, because maybe it's the type of abuse that can be hidden. They get stuck in these, terrible marriages that are unhealthy, and they're just marriages on paper, because you're not really operating as husband and wife anyway, and yet because you don't have a specific ground that you can file on, and because our no-fault statutes require both parties, the husband and the wife, to sign off agreeing to be divorced, in a lot of instances, abuse victims get caught into this never-ending, loveless marriage that is not healthy. And of course, I'm all for, healthy marriages and healthy families, but if you're trapped in one of these types of toxic relationships, and one of the parties refuses to get help and refuses to make it right, then should we really force, women in particular to stay in these toxic relationships on paper, even though they've disintegrated in reality all those years? So, I hope we're able to thread that needle. I know there are competing interests on all sides of that. But, that's been a longstanding issue in our divorce law statutes, that most states have moved to having, where just one party can essentially leave the marriage, physically leave the marriage with the kids or whatever to get out of the bad relationship, bad situation. Currently, Mississippi statute says that the one who did the leaving can't file for divorce, only the one who was left in the abandonment statutes. So we need to fix that in a way that certainly promotes and protects marriages, but at the same time allows for people who are in terrible, toxic, unhealthy relationships to be able to get out.
That makes a lot of sense. I knew that's something that Chairman Wiggins had been working on a long time, and was one of the questions that came in on the text line. Another one here: daylight savings time. Is that Is that something the Mississippi Legislature can do, or
technically we could pass a law that does something to that, but it would be sort of a patchwork of Mississippi being at 8 o'clock and our neighbors next door in Alabama being at 9 o'clock. So it really would be better coming from the federal Congress, so that it's a sort of a nationwide change. If we're going to make one, so that we don't have these patchworks of, crossing the state line and you're also losing or gaining an hour.
And then what about the House has obviously passed a raft of school choice legislation.
Yeah.
What kind of shot do you think that has over in the Senate?
Well, I hope it has a good shot. I mean, I've spoken with Chairman DeBar, our education chairman, who's fantastic. And I don't know that there's as much of an appetite as I would like there to be in the Senate. To be quite honest with you, I'm an all-in school choice person. I think I support vouchers. I feel like people, if you're a parent and you're paying taxes, that you ought to get the benefit of that. And if you're in a situation or area where you don't feel as the parent that the school that your zip code requires you to go to is the best fit for your child, you ought to be able to take benefit of your tax dollars to a parochial school, a private school, a home school, across the school lines. I mean, what's the problem with that?
Right.
And competition has always been the engine that drives America. And it works in industry and the free enterprise system. It will also work in education if we give it a chance. So that's one issue that I'm very passionate about. I've seen it work in Florida and other states that have been doing it for a really long time, and I think the time is nearing. If it's not this session, it's inevitable. It is coming to Mississippi, and I hope it comes sooner rather than later.
You and I couldn't have said it better. I agree with you. I hope parents will rise up and demand that. We've got about 30 seconds left until the break, Mr. Chairman. You have any final thoughts? Any legislation you want to plug, either to live or die, as we move to floor action?
Well, I'm supportive of a lot of the, of course, the tax cutting bills, and one bill that isn't ripe yet, but I certainly hope that in the off session we can work on. I'm particularly interested in is a bill that would more clearly define the IVF and surrogacy process. I've used that in my own family, and I know a lot of people that I've talked to have, and we currently have nothing, zero on the books of Mississippi, which is why a lot of people here, they shy away from doing those types of things in Mississippi. They go across state lines where there are laws, so that when they go through that process, they don't have the fear of an egg donor, a sperm donor, or a surrogate coming up a year later and saying, hey, I want to be the dad, or I want to be the mom, or I want to get child support or visitation rights. And that's a gaping hole in Mississippi's statutory code that I hope we can fill maybe in the next session.
Well, thank you for looking at that, and thanks for all you do for the state, Senator.
It's my honor. Thanks for having me this morning.
Y'all, this has been Lucian Smith here on the Gallo Radio Show. Coming up next is Fox News, followed by SuperTalk Mississippi News.